Hello, welcome to my presentation. All right, the effects of perceived racial discrimination on identity formation among multiracial emerging adults. The statement of the problem is multiracial individuals develop their identity in a very complex way. And to understand this would help us understand the complete person. And the racial identification, while it is a social construct, it is very important in understanding ourselves, our well-being, and our relationships. So for the multiracial individual, their race identification is really significant. The purpose of this study is that there is number one, there's very little research on the multiracial population. Excuse me, they are a growing population. However, right now they are considered minorities, yet they are significantly growing. And so there is, to date, I can only find, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 quantitative studies on multiracial individuals. So I want to obviously expand the research. But not only that, because the multiracial identity development is so complex, it needs to be understood. And multiracial individuals, they understand themselves within 2 components. They have an internal identity and they have an external identity. And it's important to get to know them and how they how they form their identity. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling. Okay, so perceived racial discrimination has emerged as one of the highest ranking risk factors of health and well-being of racial minorities. And as I said, the multiracial group is a minority. And so it has extreme negative psychological outcomes. So the theory that I am focusing on, the theory that I am using for my study is the MHAPA, Multiracial Heritage Awareness and Personal Affiliation Theory. So there's a lot here, and due to time, I'm not going to read each bullet point, but ultimately what the important thing to understand about this theory is there's an internal processing and there's an external processing. And what the external expressions of the multiracial individual include cultural practices, relationships with family and friends. The internal expressions include feelings about their racial heritage, attitudes, beliefs, a sense of belonging, and self-esteem. So basically, what this theory suggests is that that the healthiest outcome for the multiracial individual is when there's congruency between internal and external racial identities. So when there's a greater integration of internal and external expressions, that's the healthiest. When there is incongruencies, when there's division, when there is incongruencies between internal and external, then there is vulnerability to adjustment, mental health, and interpersonal difficulties. So this theory states that there are 3 identity statuses, and a status is much better to when you're dealing with multiracial individuals, a status is so much better to view them with, view their identity as a status rather than a stage or something solid, because it can waver, it can be at different statuses at different phases of their development. But anyway, there's three here: the marginal, the singular, and the integrated. So marginal, I'm going to get into this later, so I'm really not going to get into a lot of this on this slide, so you can take a look at this. But marginal is they lack a sense of belonging. Singular is they only identify with one race. And integrated is just the way it sounds. Both are together. That this is the greatest, you know, outcome right there. Integrated's the best. Marginal and singular are not doing so good. So my research question is, does perceived racial discrimination predict identity exclusion during the process of multiracial formation, thereby creating incongruence between internal and external multiracial identification? Okay, my hypotheses are, so MHAPA theory states that marginal status is characterized by a lack of commitment to one's racial heritage and an awareness of differences, feelings of disconnection from others, a lack of belonging. So therefore, perceived racial discrimination will be associated with a marginal identity status. PRD predicts that there will be an incongruence between internal and external feelings associated with marginal identity. So, okay, next, number two, MHAPA states that singular identity status is characterized by a commitment to one's racial group, one racial group. Feelings of exclusion of others, peer group, will be only one group. Therefore, PRD will also be associated with singular status. So PRD predicts incongruence between internal and external feelings associated with singular identity. MHAPA states that integrated status is characterized by identification and commitment to multiple racial groups. So therefore, PRD will not be associated with this integrated status. And then the null hypothesis is that perceived racial discrimination is not associated with any of the statuses. Okay, so here we have my sort of layout here. We've got perceived racial discrimination on the left. MHAPA identity formation connects to each status. PRD affects marginal identity. It also affects singular. It affects the internal and external feelings. Now, I don't have an arrow going to external and internal feelings or expressions with marginal and singular, specifically because it's sort of, they're broken. And I could put an arrow in a different way, maybe a broken arrow or some sort of jagged thing, but ultimately there's incongruency. So that's why they don't have arrows. But I could probably play with that a little bit more. Okay, moving on. Okay, so here I made a chart on these identity statuses. Integrated, so the status, the description of the status, and then the examples of internal feelings, and then external examples. So integrated, you can read this, there's a lot, but basically singular, again, is exactly what it says. A sense of belonging to only one. You're dating partners from only one identity group. Everything is just a sense of belonging to only one. And that's not healthy. And then marginal is disconnected from all heritage. So you are basically, you don't belong. And so you're avoiding all cultural events. So you can take a look at that. Okay, so here we have my methodology. The participants are emerging adults, which are college students, biracial and multiracial. They have to be more than one race. The inclusion criteria, each participant must have parents from 2 distinct races. So I want each parent of a different race. I definitely need in the home parents of 2 different races. And the parents don't have to be in the home together, but I need the parents to be of 2 different races. The ages 18 to 25, American resident, and I want individuals who share identity issues. Right. Yeah, that's the inclusion criteria. These are my measures, and I have another slide on these. So we'll get into that when I get there. But these are the measures. You can take a look later if you want. But I'm measuring internal feelings and external feelings, plus perceived racial discrimination, the statuses with the MHAPA measure, social desirability scale, and a demographic questionnaire. The procedure, I'm going to make connections. I have some connections in California colleges that I'm going to reach out to those connections to see if I can, what develops there. Plus, I'm trying to reach out to different connections here. Professors actually in Illinois, there's like 2 professors who've done some really significant research in this area on multiracial individuals that I'm reaching out to. A randomized sample, online questionnaires, send out a flyer to the college across all programs. I want to compensate. You can read all this. So my design is a cross-sectional design. My analysis will be a regression analysis. My predictor variable is perceived racial discrimination. My criterion variables are the statuses. And embedded in that are the internal expressions and external expressions. So, and then I have another slide on this to go into more detail. But these are my criterion variables. So these measures, I have this slide, this chart to tell you, this tells you the scale, each measure that I'm using, and what variables it's measuring. Okay, so I'm measuring self-esteem, I'm measuring belonging, physical characteristics, how people feel about themselves on the outside, racial discrimination, the MHAPA measures for awareness of their culture. It also measures affiliation with their parents' race. It also measures beliefs about their race. Do they participate in cultural events? It also measures relationships to people of various racial groups. And then it will tell me also it measures the statuses, the 3 statuses. Okay, you can take a look at this. I know I'm running long on time. So my strengths and threats. So external validity threats. I think the reactivity of assessment. I think people could, this is being aware of this study. I didn't write that right. But basically what I meant when I wrote that is that I think this is a sensitive topic when you measure racism, when you're talking about racism, and people could have a reaction to that. Test basically the same thing. They're going to be primed due to the topic of the study. Internal validity, randomization, good internal consistencies of my measures. And then the threat, again, the sample characteristics, college students overused, but yeah. Criterion validity, the strengths are the internal consistency. The social desirability scale will be a strength. A threat is mono method biases. I'm using, a single method, self-report, participant characteristics. So the individual's worldview, their defenses, their motivation, all these different things. So this is my presentation. You can take a look and read it a little bit carefully. I kind of went fast. I spoke too long. Sorry. But yes, I hope, of course, I still need to iron out a few issues, but I think I've come along better than the first one. So anyway, thank you for listening.